So our next panel is called Stop Telling Us That Our Future is Doomed. But it's not going to be doom and gloom, it's going to be very positive. So the reasoning behind this panel is that it can feel like the pressure to fix the huge climate crisis is all on young people's shoulders. It can feel like a big weight and a big responsibility. And that's something that can really be a big pressure to people who are involved in this space. We want to speak to some people who have a role and kind of see how they view that and what they're doing to not feel the pressure but to still be involved. So let's start off, if you could all introduce yourselves. Jasmine, if you go first and tell us who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. I am Jasmine. I do a lot of random things. I have a background in marine biology, but I mainly do storytelling and writing. So I've worked as a journalist, as a wildlife filmmaker, as a researcher on different projects for like BBC Natural History Unit, but I primarily focus on intersectionality. And what that means for me is I try and link the dots between all of my identities, all of the identities I see in nature, in conservation, and that I see in the world around me. And I try and basically promote this idea that we are all connected and that everyone is facing a lot of the same issues. And that if we break things down into their foundations, we will find that they usually come from the same source. So that's kind of what my work kind of revolves around. And through that, I've done things like poetry, activism for various organizations. I also am ambassador for the Mumblebee Conservation Trust because I love bees and I love insects. And I'm also on the advisory committee for RSPB England, which is very cool. So yeah, a number of different things.
Which we will touch on in a second. Sunny?
Hi everyone, I'm Sunny. Really lovely to be here. I would describe myself as a climate justice communicator and campaigner. My day job is I work full-time for a communications agency called Greenhouse, and it's a specialist communications agency that works on climate and environmental projects. So we support businesses, organizations, activists in the movement to essentially tell their stories and amplify their messages around climate action. And outside of that, I sort of dabble in various things. I am very passionate about the intersection of climate action and mental health. So I sit on the International Board of Youth for an amazing initiative called the Resilience Project, which you should all check out if you haven't already heard of it. They do amazing work empowering youth leaders to empower other youth leaders to just build more and more resilience throughout our movement, which is incredible. I support the Climate Reframe community, which is a community for people of the global majority within the UK climate movement, which is so important to be amplifying more of those voices and bringing them together. So lots of different hats, but really, really excited to be here.
Amazing. So hi, I'm Amelia. I also wear multiple different hats. I would say in a description, I'm environmentally centered and absolutely obsessed with the sea. And my kind of day jobs, I work with Earth Minutes, as my t-shirt says, as a project manager, all about turning environmental communications into easily digestible and accessible content. And then also work at Unity, all to do with community energy, so really cultivating an energy system that works for us, the people, and not the large stakeholders and shareholders who are currently getting all of the money. And around that, I'm also a youth advisor and director on a few different boards, and yeah, just really excited to get young people's voice involved in different levels of decision making.
And Sky?
So I'm Sky Neville. I'm 13 years old, and kind of like many of you, I'd describe myself as an environmental activist, and for the past 3-ish years I've been campaigning against the plastic toys that come on to kids' comics and magazines.
Amazing. Oh, great reaction. Yes. So Sky, I'd love to hear a bit more about your story. How did you first get involved, and what was the first sort of thing that you did?
So I think my involvement probably started because of where I live. It's a small village on the west coast of Wales called Fairbourne, and it's surrounded by mountains and the sea. It's really beautiful, and some of you might have actually heard of it, as it's often described in TV and newspapers as the doomed village, as this is predicted to, within the next 30 years, the entire village will be lost to the sea. So I've kind of grown up seeing media and TV crews in our village, and I remember when I was really young, kind of being scared to speak up and scared to use my voice. Every day I would walk my dog along the beach, and every day I would collect plastic waste washed up by the tides. And no matter how much I picked up, it would keep coming back. And all of these experiences kind of left me feeling angry and I guess pretty helpless. And climate change is so huge and I was so small. And then this arrived. A Horrible Histories magazine covered in plastic, a plastic wrapper, plastic tape, plastic blister packaging, and cheap plastic toys. This one magazine has 16 pieces of plastic on. And this was so wrong, but this was a problem that I could do kind of something about. So I wrote to the publishers asking them to change. I pretty much said, dude, this is wrong, stop it now. And the reply came back saying, we really do care, but blah, blah, blah. So I wrote again, and this time the reply was basically, go away, kid. Kids like this stuff. And looking back now, this is probably the moment I became an activist. How dare they tell me that this single-use plastic rubbish, that kids liked it. So that was kind of the moment where I was like, this company is going to change. So I started my petition, which now has over 66,000 supporters. I wrote emails and letters to businesses, politicians, and media outlets. And yeah, the campaign was gaining momentum. So you might be sitting there thinking, it's only a few pieces of plastic on a kid's comic and magazine. But each week in the UK alone, 10 million pieces of plastic are given away on kids' comics and magazines. And that's 500 million pieces of pointless plastic every single year, which that's just insane. So my big win was when Waitrose agreed with me and stopped selling some of the plastic tats. And since then, some of the publishers, particularly the BBC's licensed products, are moving much more towards card-based gifts. So change is happening, just quite slowly. My campaign continues to grow, and it is now fully supported by groups like Kids Against Plastic and Surfers Against Sewage, who I'm representing today, as well as celebrities including Steve Backshall, Kel Spellman, and Maddie Moat. Now known as CapTat, Kids Against Plastic Tat, the campaign is now used within Plastic Clever schools to engage and inspire young people across the country to use their voice and write letters supporting my campaign to all the major retailers across the country. And for the last 200 days, we've sent letters calling for change, so the battle continues. My campaigning, and in particular the platform and support from Surfers Against Sewage, has given me the courage to use my voice for good. It's giving me the power to challenge businesses to stand up for my beliefs, and it has given me hope. It's also given me some amazing opportunities. Last winter, I spent 3 months at Sea Turtle Conservation Project Coprot in Costa Rica, volunteering/working as Marine Plastics Officer. I learnt loads about plastic recycling in remote communities and Precious Plastics Project, which empowers people to turn their trash into treasure. This summer, I travelled around Europe with 7 other young people making a climate crisis film. We met some really awesome people and looked at some research projects which are already offering solutions to some of our climate problems. We also met some of the real bad guys, the CEOs of huge global polluters and those that finance them. It was a huge, scary opportunity for me, but I was able to deliver a very powerful speech and said everything I needed to say, so I'm really hoping it will make the cut. So I've definitely come a long way since I wrote my first letter at 10 to the publishers asking for change, and I'm really excited to see what the future brings.
Round of applause for Sky. Wow. That was just, I'm kind of speechless. That's amazing. And I think that is such a good answer to the question of this panel of stop telling us our future is doomed, because action like that is literally life-changing. So well done. Wow. Good luck following that, Amelia. No pressure. But my question to you is a bit different. It's why do you think it's so important to platform young voices? And what do you think big companies and corporations should be doing to integrate them more?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I'll try and follow, but I can't promise anything. Hopefully from just hearing Sky and everybody else today, it's so clear the value that young people can bring to organizations, corporates. But I think the importance is really twofold, and it's in terms of how we integrate young people rather than just engage young people. And the first is because we're never going to truly reach an equitable and just world if we keep only platforming and listening to the voices that created the crisis in the first place. Instead, we need to look towards those who are most affected by these crises, so the climate crisis, every single crisis, because they're all interlinked, right? And that could be people from the global south, marginalized communities, and young people as well. And we're also at a time of chaos, but throughout history, we've seen that when there's chaos, there's creation. So we can see this in the example of the Earth. So we're journeying into this new world where every decision that's being made, and therefore those who are making this decision, are cultivating this new world for us. So if we want the outcome and the solution to be equitable and just, we need the input to also reflect that, which currently isn't happening. The other reason I also believe that it's important to integrate young people is because we need to mobilize a generation of citizens who want to feel part of the solution. There's an amazing activist who you probably heard of called Clover Hogan, and she often says that the greatest threat to the environment isn't the climate crisis, but it's the powerlessness we feel in the face of it. So as young people, as people who aren't currently represented, if we don't feel like we've got a stake in the game or as though we're not being listened to, then we're going to feel disempowered. We're going to feel like we don't have a say and we're not going to act. And that's apathy, when really we need a generation of action. And I think in terms of how big corporates and organizations could integrate young people, again, I seem to always say it's twofold, but I think it's twofold. The first is working within the paradigms of business already, and that's creating a seat at the table. So creating a seat at the board of directors table, because that shows that we're taking people seriously. We're not othering them, we're saying, yes, we see you, we hear you, we know that you're affected by this, and we want to integrate your perspectives into the decisions. But the second area, which I think is the thing that we need to really lean more towards, which we're not doing at the moment, is looking towards other models. And we don't have to look too far away to find them, because we can find that in cooperatives, for example. But essentially, it's going away, leaning away from othering young people, marginalized communities, people from the global south, and nodding our head to say, yeah, we feel like we should listen to you, but we're not going to take you seriously enough to act on your thoughts and your decisions. And instead leaning towards a model where we can say, okay, because you're a citizen of this planet, you get a say, we will account for your perspectives, views, and hopes and dreams, and there should be proportionate representation for that. So those most affected by the climate crisis and all crises should have proportionate representation in the decision-making process.
Great, amazing. Let's clap, come on, yeah. Okay, Sunny, so you work in environmental communications and PR. So I guess my question for you is more about COP28. So what do you think the role of young people there should be and could be? And what do you think others who work in the climate space should think about when they're working with young people?
Yeah, this is, I think, an increasingly important question. It's always been important, but I think it's maybe useful to first start by casting our minds back to last year, COP27, which took place in Egypt. I was very privileged to be able to attend as part of the work that I was doing with Greenhouse. And COP27 saw the first ever Children and Youth Pavilion, which was a really exciting and special moment where children and youth were able to have a place at a COP for the first time. And I should go back and clarify just in case anybody hasn't sort of come across COP or been aware of that before. So that's the sort of, it's now annual international climate conference, which is attended by world leaders and by policymakers. And the idea is to sort of come together and then come away from COP, which usually lasts for 2 weeks, with a sort of agreement about what the next steps are from all of these countries who are in attendance in terms of taking climate action and tackling our climate crisis. Unfortunately, so far, they haven't been particularly effective, and I think that's important to say because similarly, to sort of echo what Amelia was saying about the idea of we need to find new models and we need to find new ways of doing things, I think the conversation around COP is increasingly that, people are recognizing this is not the best model or the best forum to be able to make decisions, because it's usually 2 weeks of, lots of policymakers sitting together in a room and having arguments and then coming away with something that's very fluffy and vague. And, last year, phase out fossil fuels was then changed to phase down fossil fuels, which is obviously just totally in disregard of the current science and isn't what we need at all. In the current trajectory that we're on. But I think to come back to the role of young people, it was incredibly an exciting and special moment last year that the Children Youth Pavilion did exist. It even ended up being included in the final draft COP text as a marker to say that, this pavilion was monumental and the voices of children and youth are incredibly important, not only important but essential. And there was this, recognition not only that they needed a space, but actually youth are, advocates, activists, even, policymakers in their own right, because youth, and I say youth as a collective, but individual sort of youth voices and people in that movement have ideas of what they want to happen. It's not just a group of people that kind of needs supporting or helping or hand-holding from adults that have been in this movement for a long time. It's actually a group that I think, to go back to the incredible story that Sky just told us, have huge potential and already are creating so much change. And so I think what adults in this movement who've kind of been here for a long time really need to do is recognize that and understand that youth are already playing an important role. They don't need anyone's help, but what they do need is support in terms of bringing them into the conversation, integrating them, listening to their asks. If you have a company or a corporation, create a board, invite youth to join it, pay them for their work, recognize the opportunities and the knowledge and the talent that they have, listen to their perspectives and actually integrate them into the work that you're doing. I think from a policy perspective, that's the case too, because youth are our future generations who are going to inherit this planet. And I think we all have very valuable perspectives that need to be included in policy agreements. And that was, just starting to be the case at COP last year. And I think this year at COP28, while there are so many sort of issues and challenges around the COP process, I think there's huge potential to actually really integrate youth voices and youth calls to action into that final agreement as a way of showing that, this is the planet that this generation is going to inherit. We need a diverse range of youth perspectives too. It's not just, this youth as this one collective. There are so many different voices, perspectives, backgrounds that are included within that collective that all need to be heard and listened to and integrated. And I think that if we do that, we'll just inherit so much of a healthier, more resilient, creative, wonderful planet, because we have this incredible diversity of voices that are already contributing so much and doing so much in this movement. So I really hope that this year at COP and also way beyond that, people in this movement really start to realize that, youth are already doing it. They just need to get on board.
Isn't this panel amazing? They're so good. Jasmine, so you are a storyteller, filmmaker, and I'd love to talk to you a bit about the narrative that a lot of the pressure to fix these huge issues are on the people most affected by it, either young people or people, people who are affected and going to be affected in the future. The pressure can feel like it's on them to fix the climate crisis. So I guess my question for you is, how can we change that narrative at COP and beyond and share the burden almost?
These are some hard acts to follow.
You got this.
Why am I last? So I think listening to all the answers and just kind of thinking about the future that we want, I'm going to start with a word that I think we've all heard, but I'm not really sure everyone knows the meaning of, which is sustainable. You always hear sustainable, and it seems to always be an answer to everything. And for me, sustainability is not a single system. It's not something that exists within one single system. So it's not something that can actually happen even if you have a group of people, even if they have the goals and the mindsets to change the world, eventually what's going to happen? They're going to get tired. They're going to reach the end of their tether. And I think this is directly linked to what is happening right now. We are expected as representatives of our communities, as representatives of young people, as representatives of people we've never even met sometimes, to change the world and to answer all of these complex questions, a lot of which is not our fault. This whole idea of climate injustice deals with the fact that actually a lot of the climate crisis problems are caused by people who aren't affected directly by those problems. And this links directly into sustainability. So I think an answer is to almost restructure. We've got to restructure our idea of what sustainability means. Sustainability doesn't mean that we just want one system for everything to be better for everyone in. Sustainability means we want a community effort to come up with a flexible range of systems that will change and will evolve with the people and with the ideologies and with the environments that come, because they will change very fast, as they have done in previous years. But the problem with our entire system and with the system that we use to fight against the climate crisis, to fight against any ism within society, any sort of bias, is that it's working off of the same foundation. And this foundation is one that has been set by a group of people who haven't got the lived experience of future young people, who haven't got the lived experience of most global majority people who are affected by the climate crisis. And if we keep working off of that foundation, we will continue with a lot of the mistakes that it has, and we will continue this narrative that we have to fix the system, that we have to tape over the cracks, that we have to paint over all of the, the bits and pieces that are wrong, when in fact what we really need to do is to re-understand that this is not a sustainable system. And by that I mean it's not a system that is flexible. So I think the answer in terms of changing narrative and in terms of changing how young people and everyone really deals with this system is to make it more flexible, and to rebuild a system where we as young people are not just representing entire communities, we're representing ourselves and our individual wants and needs. And then we are also being changed out for another person in our community, and we are representing them, and we are choosing them. And then we are being changed out, for another one. It turns out that actually what's more sustainable is lots and lots of voices with their own individual biases, their own individual perspectives. And what does that make up? That makes up a community. And then instead of having a group led by one person, you have a leader full. I think there's a quote somewhere, and I can't remember who said it, and I'm not going to do complete justice to it, but the quote is more about a community being leaderful rather than leaderless. And when we talk about community, we generally should be referring to every individual having the autonomy and dignity to decide their own future. And that is why the focus on young people, whilst it is so strong, needs to change from let's pick out this one young person, let's put all the pressure on them, ask them all the questions, base our entire community, base our entire outlook on their community on them. That is a big responsibility for a young person to hold. And I think, again, what it deals with is this idea of sustainability, of long-term management, and also of climate doomism. I know this whole event, this whole panel is based on climate doomism, but climate doomism is based, again, in this ideology that we can't do anything sometimes, that we're doomed. And if you think about it, a lot of the reason that we're doomed is because we're working with a set of tools that, one, we can't access properly, and two, have caused the problems in the first place. So in order to actually change anything, we need to look at alternative systems. And I like that that's been mentioned already, because I would say focus on a flexible, sustainable system that isn't the current system that we use. That is an alternative system. It doesn't need to be rebuilt. They exist already within our knowledge of indigenous wisdom, of communities of color, of communities that exist around the world that are based in mutual aid, in care of the individual. We have these examples already. We have these blueprints to use, which we can use to then structure solutions and actual change. and not in a way that is tokenistic, that is individual, that it focuses too much energy on one person. Because what that doesn't do is give them time to rest, and it doesn't give them time to recuperate, which, you know, essentially renders the whole solution null and void. Because eventually we want to reach a world where everyone can individually do the things that they want to do, live in the natural world, humans and non-humans alike, and exist in a comfortable, sustainable future where they aren't needed to be useful just based on their innate identity. And so I would say that alternative systems is probably what we need to work more for. Again, this is my individual opinion, and I will criticize myself in saying that actually what's required more is a community answer to this. So go away with a pinch of salt and do your own research.
These guys are great. If I've got time, I'm going to ask you all one final question, which is just, you've all touched on it a little bit, but if you could give one piece of advice to any young people feeling a bit overwhelmed, feeling that doomism, feeling maybe powerless, it can be something small, but just something that just might help someone out. You're nodding, Sunny, so you go first.
I'm happy to go first because I think I might actually have a more introductory answer, and then I think the other three will add so much more knowledge and wisdom and value. But I think I would really love to say just that it's okay, because I think for me, being in the climate movement for a while, it wasn't something I actually heard until very recently. I was very lucky last year when I was working with the Resilience Project to have a sort of group session with Caroline Hickman, who's a climate psychologist, and she does incredible work sort of working with young people. She's been coaching young people who experience eco-anxiety or climate anxiety for a long time. And she said something along the lines of, feeling eco-anxiety or climate anxiety or overwhelm or fear or however you want to describe it or however you might experience it is a perfectly natural response to the situation that we're in. And that blew my mind, because I think some people here may feel like that's obvious or they've already heard that. But I think if there is anyone here who hasn't, I think for me, that was a moment where I was just like, wow, that's so true, and no one has ever said that to me before. And I think especially when you are in spaces sort of outside of the climate movement and you may feel like I'm the only one experiencing this, or people around me aren't reacting this way or feeling this way, and just sort of going about their lives and not feeling these emotions, it can feel like I'm or we're the ones who are abnormal or experiencing something that isn't kind of a normal, regular thing to feel. And she said that, and I was just like, you know what? That is absolutely right. When we think about the enormity and the sort of gravity of the situation we're in, feeling climate anxiety is a perfectly natural response. And actually, she then went on to say something that was along the lines of, people who don't feel eco-anxiety are actually kind of the weird ones. And I was like, yeah, that is so, so true. And of course, yeah, I'm sure others will add value in terms of talking more about this and sort of how they deal with feeling overwhelmed or potential kind of solutions. But I think that is something I really just wanted to say, is that it's okay, it's actually normal, it actually makes a lot of sense to feel these emotions. And I think for me, that alone was actually incredibly comforting and has helped me a lot.
Jasmine?
Yeah, I think I would really echo that. I would echo a two-tiered normalization. A normalization of us being aware that these feelings of anxiety are very much, you know, in response to a very real threat, and that it's, you know, being anxious in the face of a threat is, that's, you know, that's normal. But also the normalization of any sort of aid going towards that, and any sort of rest and recuperation. And I think that comes from support and support systems. I wish that I'd put more effort when I first started out in this movement to have support around me, to have a place to rest when it got too much. Again, speaking to that less individual and more sustainable community method of saying, this is not all on me. I am not the voice of my generation. I am a person with wants, needs, and I need to be able to sit down sometimes and take a breather. And for that to happen, if I want the movement to go on and if I don't want to feel like it's going to stop without me, I should probably have friends who believe in the same thing. You know, have a support system that believes in the same thing so they can step up and take over for me when I need to rest, which is a very much a community way of doing things. But I would like to add very quickly that I think an essential part and an essential thing that will help a lot of young people and that has helped me more recently is the concept of unlearning and the concept of taking any assumptions that we have of the system we are in. Because if you think about it, our whole system and the problems that we have with our system, we're told again and again, okay, it's really bad, it's really bad. Okay, let's try and fix it. Oh my God, but it's still really bad. It's because it's mainly based within a system that is quite broken and unfortunately isn't useful or sustainable. But that's not the end of the world, because we can use other systems. And by understanding that a lot of the assumptions we make about biology, ecology, conservation, about the future of our world, about ourselves, are based on assumptions and foundations that are actually, if you go beneath them, they have lots and lots of structure and differences behind them that we can unlearn. That gave me a lot of hope, because right now I feel very hopeful that we can change the future of this, because I know that we can break it up into pieces. I know that it's not built in stone. These aren't like etched in the, in the natural like core of the earth. These are social constructions built by societies. They come and go. They're built by governments. They're policies built by people. They can be unlearned. They can be destructured, and they can be decentralized. But we need to get very comfortable with the awareness that these things aren't, part of our biology. These are constructs we make, which is fine. Money's a construct. It's real. It has an effect on us. Still a construct. Still can be destructured. Everything can be. And I think unlearning is a really good way of giving people hope, because we don't have to live like this forever.
Amazing advice. Sky, any advice from you?
So for me personally, the support of family and organisations has been really important in my journey. And knowing people that believe in you and just get you is really, really cool. And I'm here, obviously, today representing SAS. And they've given me so much support and encouragement over the last few years, and I really can't thank them enough. And I think that's one of the things, like, find your people. SAS really works well for me. Like, find a group, organisation, person that just really supports you. And, yeah, it's get involved, get support. Like, yeah.
100%. And Amelia, any last words of advice from you?
Yeah, I think I would 100% echo what everybody said, and I believe in all of that so much. I think the unlearning point is so true, and it's not spoken about at all, really, so it's nice to see that bubbling up. I think to add on to that as well, the idea of rest is very important, because often we don't think about rest as a thing. We're like, okay, I'm going to go and rest, and default that's, okay, I'm going to go have a nap, or I'm going to go chill out somewhere, which is amazing if that works for you. But for some people, that doesn't work for them. Maybe it's going, if you're privileged enough, go for a surf, or maybe go to the gym, or just really figuring out what rest means for you, because people don't get energy from the same things. So figuring out what you can do that brings you energy rather than drains it, and using that as your rest point. Also thinking about not resting just when you have burnout. I think so often in this movement we're also also passionate about it. We want to dedicate almost every second of our day to it, and that's not sustainable. And then we rest in terms of our physical health. But what if we look towards a model where we integrated rest and we scheduled it into our day? What about if our work week and our organisation said, yes, you can take this as rest, and this is going to inevitably help you perform better as well? So yeah, thinking about what rest means to you and the fact that it doesn't mean the same to every single person.
Can we have a big round of applause for all of the panellists, please?